Looking at the bracket for the NCAA Women's Basketball Tournament, it sets up quite nicely for Dawn Staley and the South Carolina Gamecocks.
You are Locked On Gamecocks, your daily podcast on the South Carolina Gamecocks, part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
Hello, Gamecock Nation, and welcome back to the Locked On Gamecocks podcast. I'm Angeline, the host of this podcast, and you can find my written work over on Gamecock Digest on Fan Nation. Thank y'all so much for making the Locked On Gamecocks podcast your first listen or watch for your team here today. We are free and available both on YouTube and wherever you get your audio podcasts daily. Today's episode is brought to you by LinkedIn. These days, every new potential hire can feel like a high-stakes wager for your small business. And that's why LinkedIn Jobs helps find the right people for your team faster and for free. Post your job for free at linkedin.com/lockedoncollege. Terms and conditions apply. We're going to bounce around a lot on this Monday edition of the Locked On Gamecocks podcast. At the end of the show, we're going to talk about some of the major storylines heading into spring practice for Shane Beamer and South Carolina's football team. Halfway through the show, we'll talk about the most important player for South Carolina's men's basketball team as they begin tournament play on Thursday. But we're going to start off with the women's basketball team because we did not talk about them late last night. I was going to do a live show, but with all the research that I had to do and the things I had to do in order to set up my trip for the first round of the men's tournament, I just decided that it would be best to go ahead and do a show for this morning. So I looked at the bracket and the regional itself for South Carolina, and honestly, the Gamecocks were dealt quite a nice hand by the selection committee. And as the number one overall seed for the entire tournament, they should be dealt a nice hand. But obviously, coming into Selection Sunday, a lot of South Carolina fans felt like that something was going to be done here, whether that meant LSU was maybe in the other regional that was paired up with South Carolina's regional on their side of the bracket. Maybe they put Iowa down there so that way they get a rematch of the Final Four matchup that we saw last year. There was a bunch of different things that this committee could have possibly done merely for ratings, and it would not have been shocking. But as tempting as it probably was, that did not end up being the case. I'm not going to show y'all South Carolina's entire regional, but I will just say this. The most notable teams in the Gamecocks regional are the number 2 seed Notre Dame Fighting Irish, the number 6 seed Nebraska Cornhuskers, and the number 7 seed Ole Miss Rebels. By the way, the number 8 seed in the regional is the North Carolina Tar Heels, whom the South Carolina Gamecocks played back in the regular season up in Chapel Hill. They won that game, of course. So there are some familiar opponents in this regional, but honestly, the only team that I see that could pose a challenge to South Carolina out of that whole group is the Notre Dame Fighting Irish. They, of course, played them back in the very first game of the regular season all the way over in Paris. The Fighting Irish have a star freshman point guard in Hannah Hidalgo, along with several other key players, Sonia Citron, and I believe also Maddie Westbeld, and a couple of other players as well. But that is the main team to watch for in South Carolina's regional. Now, looking at the same side of the bracket, but going to Portland for that regional, there are 4 notable teams in that grouping. There's the number 1 seed Texas Longhorns, the number 5 seed Utah Utes, the number 6 seed Tennessee Lady Volunteers, and the number 2 seeded Stanford Cardinals. Now, in terms of teams that could really give South Carolina a run for their money, should they match up with them, I would say that you've got 2 of them right here, Texas and Stanford. Utah gave South Carolina a massive fight on a neutral court earlier in the regular season, and we all know what the Tennessee Lady Volunteers almost pulled off several times in each of the 3 games they played against South Carolina in conference play, and then the final one, of course, being that SEC tournament semifinal where Camilo Cardoso had to bank in a 3-point shot to win the game at the final second for South Carolina. So all 4 of those teams, in my opinion, could at least challenge South Carolina, but they are all in the other regional on their side of the bracket. So the Gamecocks will only have to worry about playing maybe one of those teams, and that would take place, of course, in the Final Four in Cleveland, Ohio. Now, here's the regional that I really want to discuss with y'all. The Albany 2 regional. This one is now on the opposite side of the bracket. In this regional, the Iowa Hawkeyes are the number 1 seed. The number 3 seed is the LSU Tigers. The number 2 seed is the UCLA Bruins. That might be the toughest regional out of all of them in this tournament. Iowa and LSU obviously got put together so that they could get at least potentially a national championship rematch from last year, as long as LSU is able to get past UCLA. And I don't think that's a guarantee. UCLA has got a good team. Lauren Betts being their center. Kiki Rice is a really good guard that they have. Charisma Osborne is a 5th-year senior, I want to say. They've got some good pieces on that squad. So that is by far going to be the toughest one to win. Whoever gets out of that regional, they will have absolutely earned it. And then the other regional that we haven't talked about is Portland 3. That's paired up with the one that we just talked about. Really and truthfully, the 2 notable teams there are number 2 seed Ohio State and number 3 seed UConn. And yes, the number 1 seed in that regional is Southern Cal, who obviously has Juju Watkins. I have to be honest with y'all, maybe it's just a little bit of bias. I still am not sold on the Southern Cal Trojans because I think that, quite frankly, they are just Juju Watkins, and if it wasn't for her, they wouldn't really be anything. Kind of like how I feel about Iowa with Caitlin Clark being on that team. But maybe I'm wrong, and I will see that very clearly in the tournament once it gets underway. My point bringing up all of these different regionals is you could see very easily South Carolina got a really good draw in terms of the teams that they got in the regional. Now, you might also sit there and say, well, they got a good draw, but at the same time, the committee kind of messed them over because of the fact that they put several teams that are familiar with South Carolina in their regional, which I gotta say, that was probably going to happen no matter what. It's almost impossible to have an entire regional go in your favor. So South Carolina was going to have somebody, and for them, that wound up being the Notre Dame Fighting Irish. Nebraska, I like Nebraska a lot. They gave Iowa a run for their money in the Big Ten tournament title game. Probably should have won that game, and they could shoot the 3-ball quite well. So interested to see what they do. Ole Miss, we all know about that defense and what Coach Hill has done over there in Oxford. And then, again, the number 8 seed, North Carolina Tar Heels, who, if they take care of business with Michigan State in round 1, they could very well be the Gamecocks' second-round matchup this next Sunday at the CLA. So certainly a lot of excitement to be had with the women's basketball tournament without question. Now, the men's tournament was also announced on Sunday evening, and we're not going to talk about the matchup against Oregon yet. We're going to start that on tomorrow's show, but for today, I want to talk about one particular player on this roster, the player that I think will be the most important piece for South Carolina in the NCAA tournament. I'll discuss who that player is in just a couple moments right here on Locked On Gamecocks. Today's show and this week's March Madness bracket highlight is brought to you by our friends at Nissan. Each week we're picking one team that stands out, a team that's pushed it further than the rest, just like any of the all-new 2024 Nissan SUVs. These guys were able to take it to the next level. The NC State Wolfpack is going to be my pick as this week's basically Nissan Row, because this team went on a 5-game winning streak in the ACC tournament to clinch an automatic qualifying bid and make it into the NCAA tournament, which meant they had to knock off Duke and North Carolina in order to accomplish that feet. They say win life, go rogue. And that's exactly what the Wolfpack did this past weekend. Take the Nissan Row, Nissan Pathfinder, or Nissan Armada and go find your next big adventure. Shop NissanUSA.com. Today's show is brought to you by Amazon Fire TV. Fire TV is your destination for sports, from live games to highlights to in-depth analysis. Fire TV offers amazing viewing experiences with smart TVs, as well as the Fire TV stick that you can plug into your existing TV that provides access to millions of movies and TV episodes, as well as free and live TV. Whether it's opening weekend for baseball or the college basketball tournament, you're going to want to have a Fire TV. Fire TV recently created Fire TV channels to deliver a constant supply of the latest videos from your favorite sports brands, all for free. That includes all of us at Locked On and most of the big pro leagues and college conferences as well. Fire TV channels let you dive into all of the game analysis, highlights, and more to keep up to date on all the latest in the world of sports, such as March Madness, the NBA, MLB, and lots more. Not to mention great news, entertainment, gaming, travel, cooking videos as well. Check out Fire TV channels on Fire TV and Alexa devices. If you haven't checked out Fire TV channels, you should. Trust me on this. To learn more, visit www.amazon.com/LockedOnFireTV. Welcome back to this Monday edition of the Locked On Gamecocks podcast, where we cover your South Carolina Gamecocks every single day. The Locked On College Basketball Bracket Breakdown Show is now available on the Locked On College Basketball podcast. Experts Andy Patton and Isaac Shade will break down their brackets and discuss everything that you need to know to fill out a winning bracket and prepare for this year's NCAA tournament. Find the Locked On Bracket Breakdown now on the Locked On College Basketball podcast, wherever you get your audio podcasts daily. South Carolina's men's basketball team will be playing their first round matchup against the Oregon Ducks this coming Thursday afternoon. And obviously at this point in the season, we don't know how far South Carolina is going to go. Look, they could win this first round game against Oregon, and they could go on a deep run in the NCAA tournament. They could also potentially go one and done. We genuinely do not know. But what I do think we all know is this. There is one particular player on this team that is more important to this group's success through this time of the year than anybody else. And that player is Talon Cooper. When you look at the main rotation for South Carolina's men's basketball team at this point in the season, there are only two players in that rotation that have NCAA tournament experience. Meechie Johnson played 2 games for the Ohio State Buckeyes back in 2022 before entering the portal that offseason and coming to South Carolina. Talon Cooper made it to the tournament with Morehead State back in 2021 and did not make it past the first round as his team was bounced by, I believe, the number 3 seeded West Virginia Mountaineers. So obviously, Cooper only having 1 game, that does not mean that he is going to play perfect basketball. But as we talked about throughout this season, Talon Cooper's experience, all of the different situations that he has been through in his basketball career as a point guard, it makes him such a great floor general for this team. This team would not be the same without Talon Cooper. Yes, Meechie Johnson is the one that is probably more athletic and can score in different ways compared to Talon Cooper. Colin Murray Boyles, he is probably the most gifted front court player that we've seen South Carolina have on their roster in possibly the last 2 decades or so. And they're going to bring some more guys into this program in the very near future, such as an Eli Ellis from the state of North Carolina, who more than likely are going to be more skilled in terms of scoring the basketball than Talon Cooper has been throughout his college career. But Talon Cooper is so smart with the decisions that he makes. He always knows where he needs to go with the basketball. And sure, again, that does not mean that he never makes a mistake. He does make a mistake from time to time, but it is usually broken up by a lot of great plays, whether it's setting guys up or making the right pass that leads to a bucket. The thing that Gamecock fans are going to remember when they watch these first few games of the NCAA tournament on Wednesday, if you're watching one of those play-in games, or on Thursday when the first round officially begins, is that these players are going to be frantic. There are going to be times where, quite frankly, they're going to make decisions that are going to leave you scratching your head. You're going to wonder what on earth is going on. And almost every single team, for at least a certain portion of their first game, is going to go through that. And that includes South Carolina. For all the experience that this team has, they're going to probably play at the very beginning like it is a fire drill. And that is why Talon Cooper is going to be so important for this team, because I'm sure even for him, the first 3-4 minutes of the first round game against Oregon, he might even speed things up a little bit himself. But eventually, he will be the same guy that will go, okay, guys, hey, we need to settle down now, okay? We've played a few minutes now. We've gotten the jitters out. Now let's go to work and let's play South Carolina basketball. If you want any position, if there's any position on your team where you want to have a guy that has experience in this moment, that is obviously your leader, it is still the point guard position. And the Gamecocks have that in Talon Cooper. So, if South Carolina is going to continue to prove all the doubters wrong and go on a run, whether it is just to the second weekend or who knows, if they make it all the way to the Final Four in Arizona, I guarantee you a big reason for that will be because of Talon Cooper. So, in terms of who is the most important player for the Gamecocks in this tournament, without question, it is Talon Cooper, the native of Roebuck, South Carolina. Now, in all the hoopla with these basketball tournaments about to get underway later this week, spring practice starts tomorrow for Shane Beamer and South Carolina's football team. I know I've not talked about a whole lot on this show, again, because there's just been a lot going on the hardwood recently, but we are going to dive into some of the major storylines for the football team as they get set for their first practice that will be taking place this morning. We'll talk about all that in a couple moments right here on Locked On Gamecocks. Today's show is brought to you by LinkedIn Jobs. When you're hiring for your small business, you want to find quality professionals that are right for the role. And that's why you have to check out LinkedIn Jobs, because they have the tools to help find the right professionals for your team faster and for free. LinkedIn has a vast network of more than 1 billion professionals worldwide, which is a big reason why 86% of small businesses get a qualified candidate within 24 hours when they use LinkedIn Jobs. 2.5 million small businesses are already using LinkedIn Jobs to help hire new employees. So why not join them? Post your job for free at linkedin.com/lockedoncollege. That's linkedin.com/lockedoncollege to post your job for free today. Terms and conditions do apply. Welcome back to today's edition of the Locked On Gamecocks podcast, where we cover your team every single day in just 30 minutes. In terms of the major storylines for South Carolina's football team heading into the beginning of spring practice, we've got to start off with Lenore Sellers, who is following in the footsteps of more than likely the most talented quarterback that has ever played for South Carolina's football program in Spencer Rattler. With number 7 officially moving on to the NFL, it is now time for number 16 to take over the reins. And so obviously, when the media is able to attend practice, all eyes are going to be on him and what all he is doing throughout practice. This will be Lenore Sellers' second full off-season with South Carolina's football program. I do think that should be noted. He did not get here during the summertime last year. He got a head start this past spring when he went through spring practice in 2023. So this will be his second offseason where he gets to learn the system, any of the changes that offensive coordinator Dow Loggins wants to make, which is going to be another storyline to watch here with this offense. But if this team is going to make it back to a bowl game this upcoming season, number 16 has got to be a big reason behind that. More so by not making mistakes and just making the right decisions the majority of the time. So it'll be interesting to see how that part of Lenore Sellers' game looks when we watch him in spring ball for the next several weeks. The next storyline that I think is going to get a lot of buzz is going to be the new slate of starters at the skill positions on the offensive side of the ball. I want to just real quickly read off the names of the guys that were stars at these positions last year. Mario Anderson Jr., Juice Wells, Xavier Legette, Amarian Brown, and Trey Knox. Guess what? None of those guys are here anymore. Now, we've got a whole new slate of guys coming in at all of these positions. And in my opinion, as of right now, this will probably be the starting lineup. Rocket Sanders at running back, Jared Brown, one of the wide receiver spots, Gage Larvadane, Amari Bruce Huggins, and Joshua Simon. 5 new starters at the skill positions. So, for Lenore Sellers, the issue here is going to be building a rapport with these guys. Now, they don't lack experience. They all have experience. But the only guy that he really knows well is Joshua Simon at tight end. And obviously, he's not going to throw Joshua Simon the ball like 20 plus times a game. So, how does Lenore Sellers build that relationship in the offense with the rest of these guys? And how do these guys just step up overall? Again, we all know what Rocket Sanders can do. But how is Jared Brown going to adjust to this level? How is Gage Larvadane going to adjust to this level? Amari Bruce Huggins, we don't know yet. So that'll be something to watch as well as spring practice moves along. The final storyline that I want to talk about real quickly has nothing to do with the offense. It has nothing to do with the defense. It has to do with Beamer ball, because there's a changing of the guard this offseason, or it has been. As Pete Lembo has moved on to become the head coach at Buffalo, South Carolina has hired former longtime NFL special teams coordinator Joe DeCamillis to take over that role. So what is that going to look like? We have heard already that Joe DeCamillis is not a coach that lacks for energy, which is obviously a good thing. If you want your guys to play special teams, or you want players that are coming in to play special teams, you got to have a kind of excitement about you when it comes to that phase of the game. And I don't think there's any question that Joe DeCamillis has that. Now, DeCamillis might not have the crafty, unique trick play pamphlet in his pocket that Pete Lembo always had with him throughout the last 3 years in Columbia. So we might not see quite as many trick plays. But if swapping out some of those trick plays means that we'll see the special teams unit bounce back from what was, quite frankly, a lackluster showing in 2023, all things considered, then I think that Shane Beamer will be perfectly okay with that. And look, if Joe DeCamillis needs a little bit of guidance, or he wants, a suggestion or two, he can always just walk to the head coach's office and ask Shane Beamer, what do you think about this or that? And he's going to get a very good answer. So I know that obviously you can't get a ton out of special teams from spring practice. We always see the special team drills at the start of practice whenever we're there, because Shane Beamer and these head coaches, they're very smart in how they structure them, and they know what they're doing. But it will be interesting to see, you have a bunch of new faces through the transfer portal and also your high school recruiting class and a new special teams coordinator. How do you mesh all that together to make this special teams unit one of the more elite units again this next season? And heck, it doesn't even have to be elite. Let's say get back to the top 25. Last season, this unit was about 42nd or 43rd, I want to say. And again, because of the expectation now that this fan base has for that group, that's just not good enough. You've got to be better than that. Pete Lembo's first unit, I believe, ranked 18th in the country in terms of special teams efficiency. So at least get back to that range, and I think that will help this team win a couple games that maybe people don't expect them to win in the 2024 season. So it'll be interesting to see how Beamer Ball evolves under new leadership this off season. With that being said, that's going to do it for today's edition of the Locked On Gamecocks podcast. I hope y'all thoroughly enjoyed today's show. As always, let me know your thoughts on the women's basketball team and their path to the Final Four. Do you find it to be pretty easy compared to all the other regionals on that bracket? Do you think that Taylon Cooper is the most important player for the men's basketball team in their tournament? And what are your big storylines to watch for the football team as spring practice is about to begin? Let me know your thoughts down below in the comments section if you watch today's show on YouTube, or you can shoot me a direct message on X at @ALion_SC if you listen to today's show on an audio podcast app. As always, thank y'all so much for tuning in. Have a great rest of your Monday and a fantastic start to the work week, and happy March Madness. I'll be sure to catch y'all on the next show of the Locked On Gamecocks podcast.